Thanks for joining us on Coast to Coast Pest Talk.
What's up, guys? Thanks so much for tuning in to Coast Pest Talk. Today we're going to be doing a fantastic interview with Alex Wade. He's from the UK, and we'll just jump right in here.
This is fantastic. This is, I have to say, in terms of podcasts and setups, and this is really good fun. I also do a little podcast on the side, and it's a lot more technically complex than put in your name and walk through this door. This is I'm gonna have to talk to you guys about this later. This is amazing.
This is all Andy's magic. So
we are rank amateurs.
Well, that doesn't do my confidence levels much good, considering. No, I joke. It's all good. How are you all doing?
Oh, we're doing absolutely great.
Great.
I think this may actually be the first transcontinental and Atlantic podcast session possibly ever, right? I mean, we're going from the west coast of North America all the way to England.
I mean, depending on who's taking the lead on this, the west coast or the east coast, we're either covering a lot of water or we're covering a lot of land. But either which way, we're getting a long way around, aren't we?
For sure.
That's right. Can we label this as a global podcast now?
Oh yeah,
I think
sure.
We could definitely do that.
Oh, absolutely. That works. That works for me as well. I'm riding this bandwagon. We can do this. There we go.
Well, thanks so much for coming on with us. This is I think this is going to be great. I followed your stuff on LinkedIn and some of your articles that you've been writing over there and stuff, and just fantastic stuff. And I've been watching your podcasts and things as I could find them and whatnot. So I think you and I are right in the same wheelhouse in how we think about things.
Oh, that's really good to hear. And I've been getting more and more fascinated by how you guys do pest management out in the States, simply because it's such a different world to what we do in the UK. And to be fair, what we do in the UK is such a different world to what happens in Europe. So it's amazing. And I've gone and done lectures on pest management and how to use products in my last job all around the world. From UAE to Singapore to Australia. And every time I go to a new country, I'm always fascinated by how things are done differently. And sometimes it's low-tech, high results, and sometimes it's high-tech, no results. So it's really interesting to see how people approach these same pests in different locations and different cultures around the world.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think my perception with what's going on in England, as far as use of rodenticides, I think you guys are far ahead of us, and I don't mean ahead necessarily in doing it better, but I think the going down the road of having rodenticides be eliminated from your service practices, I think you guys are far ahead, and we're going to be right behind you.
So there's a lot of pressure on our toolkit in the UK. And it's not just pressure coming against the chemicals, it's pressure. So recently we've been having big debates as to whether or not to continue using things like glue boards in the UK. And that's going through, so of course it's gone through UK Parliament and now it's going through the various devolved nations. So Wales, for example, has passed law that glue boards can no longer be used in Wales. Scotland's still out on the debate. And England said yes, but it's still yet to develop a license. So the toolkit is constantly being challenged, but I think the reason that we're here today and the reason you reached out to me is because the toolkit's also evolving, isn't it? There's new things being added to the kit all the time. And from my perspective, so I've been in this industry all of my working life, really. And my father was in the industry before me. He actually founded Pelgar International, that you guys may or may not have heard of, a manufacturer and distributor of rodenticides in the UK. And so I've had this in my blood for quite some time. But if you look at this, and I'm sure it's the same out in the States, we always look at the challenges to our toolkit as being new, but they're not. You go back 10 years and we had hydrogen cyanide and strychnine and zinc phosphate and things like that. You go back another 10 years and we had some chemicals that would kill brown rats as well as beluga whales and everything in between. It's just an evolution, isn't it? It's just a change with the times. But because it's being faced to us at the moment, it seems to be the biggest one going. But it's part of the evolution of pest management. And there will always be pests. It's how we approach them that's going to be the exciting thing at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah. So just for context, what year did you kind of jump into back into doing the pest management industry?
Oh, so would you like a little bit of a candid life history here? I mean,
Yeah, because I know I know you had moved off from it, right, and went to
yeah.
university and then came back into it at some point. I'm just curious, yeah, what that
Oh
timeline
yeah.
is.
So of course, as I said before, my father did pest management around the world. He worked for ICI Zeneca. Then he set off in 1995 when I was about 10 years old to set up his own company with another gentleman. And I worked sort of like part-time. We won't say child labor, but we will strongly insinuate towards it. You know, evenings and weekends, going and helping out dad. You know, as you do when you're young. And then at about sort of like as soon as I could start to work, I would work evenings and weekends with him, just on the factory floors, just doing bits and bobs, just to be with dad at the end of the day and to earn a bit of pocket money to then sort of like go and buy things. And then you're quite right. I went away to university to break free from the family mold, to break free, to go and do my own thing, and to move away from the pest management industry. Marine biology and oceanography is what I took. Couldn't get much further away, could you? You know, I've just swapped literally everything, you know, conservation for management, you know, and so, but I did that for 3 years and I finished university. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I finished university and I went back working with dad and I dragged my heels and I really, really dragged my heels. And finally, he and the other director turned around and said, "What are you doing? You know, what are you doing? You've got a biological degree, you've got a statistical degree. Why do you just go and get a proper job?" And I sat down and thought, why haven't I got a proper job, really? And I was like, actually, I really enjoy this industry. And I'm dragging my heels because I don't really want to leave it. So at that point, I made the conscious decision to actually start using the tools and the knowledge that I had in a more focused way. So it would have been around about 2006, 2007 that I started to really, you know, move away from just being, you know, and when I worked for my father's company, it wasn't a case of, here you go, here's a middle management position, go and order some pens and look pretty. No, I actually started work on the factory floor. So all of the products that my father's company made, I learned how to make them, literally from mixing them up to packaging them out to sticking the labels on to standing them on a pallet, end to end. And so actually then when I went to go and work in the laboratories and ended up doing a lot of the insect testing for almost 10 years, I had a pretty good idea what the products were being used for and where they were going and how they were being made. And then as time went on, I went I went more and more into the testing and development side of things. I ended up doing a lot of field trials as well as lab trials. So I had a really good idea of not just how the products were made and how they operated in closed conditions in the labs, but to then how they operated out in the field as well. And that's pretty much what went. So 2006, 2007 is when it restarted. That was the question you asked me, and I gave you a lot of additional, fairly superfluous information with that. But hey ho, there we go.
That's all right. Okay, so I've just realized I think I'm the oldest person on this podcast right now. Oh no!
Despite the fact that I am, you know, wonderfully going, you know, I've been grey for very many years here. But we're going to ask that awkward question. I'm going to put you to the test. How old do you believe I am?
Now you've done it, Andy.
I thought we were pretty similar ages, but I think I'm a quite a bit older.
I'll put you out of your misery. I am only 38.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Okay. Fantastic.
I apologize profusely. But there we go.
Okay, fantastic. But you know, back to your point before about things changing. And in my course and career in the industry, my thing dropped out. There we go. In my course in the industry, things have absolutely changed. I mean, I started in professional pest management in '97 out in the field as a summer job while I went to college. And since then, I mean, like, things change, and almost always we end up okay. Like the industry as a whole, we figure out new ways to do things. And I've seen a steady increase in professionalism in our industry here. And believe it or not, like the premium that we can put on our services
Hmm.
at every turn. Every time there's something that gets taken away and the whole industry cries and says, "Oh my God, what are we ever going to do, without this tool? You took this tool away from us. It's the end. The sky's falling. There's nothing we can do now." We figure out a way to do it, and somehow it ends up being, we make more money. The premium, on the service goes up. It takes more skill, more intelligence, more professionalism, and we end up okay until the next crisis comes along where we cry that we're never gonna take care of anything. We're gonna be overrun now.
So that brings. So I have a question for you. Because I'm right in understanding that many territories within the US lost the ability to use dusts over the last couple of years. Is that correct? For dusts for treating things like wasp nests externally, and
No, we haven't here in New York. I don't think, Gabe, you over in Portland, have you guys? I haven't heard that. We've moved away from dust just as like a practical thing. Like we don't use any dust formulations on interiors of structures really anymore at all. We'll use them sometime for wasp nests, yellow jackets and things, void nests. But actually it's funny. Our dust usage just voluntarily has gone to almost zero. I mean, how about you, Gabe? Are you guys, you use a lot of dust over there?
No, we're exactly the same. We use it for wasps. And then the only other thing we regularly will use it for is like box elders. We get really bad box elders.
Sure.
Just crack and crevice treatment.
But I don't think there was a regulatory change that I know of. I do know here in New York State, we do have, like you're talking about with the glue boards, there is some legislation that has been kicking around every legislative session looking to ban glue boards. It hasn't passed. And to my knowledge, I don't think any of the states here have banned glue boards yet.
Not yet.
But it's something that is certainly being talked about.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the only reason I bring up the dusts is because we in the UK are currently facing a bit of a challenge that we have several dust formulations, but really they rely on, three active ingredients, four at a push, which is chrysanthemum extract, so natural pyrethrum, permethrin, and then, of course, bendiacarb. But the bendiacarb registration from Envu it's not been they haven't reapplied for it. So we're losing bendiacarb for treating wasps. And there's a huge, I wouldn't say furore, but there's a lot of angst in our industry because bendiacarb is a fantastic tool for the control of wasps in the UK arena. And things like permethrin, although it is still very effective, comes with a load of drawbacks, which is you get a lot of very angry wasps as a result of permethrin powders and, several thousand angry, stinging small insects. But it's exactly as you said, which is this is the crest of the wave for us. A lot of people are seeing this as a bad thing because it's going to make life more difficult. And others are just cottoning onto the fact that actually this could be a good thing because it's making life more difficult. Because it means that those who were simply just in it for a quick buck are no longer going to be able to do that anymore. It's going to take a level of specialization, a level of professionalism that and I wanted say that the have a go hero is no longer going to be able to do because the easy tools have gone away.
Yeah, I like the have a go hero. That's a cool cool turn of phrase. We say we have a chuck in a truck. It's some guy with a pickup truck, and he'll show up and do whatever for you.
Oh, I can see this very rapidly. This transcontinental thing being just evolving into idioms and the rest of it. I think that's a podcast to itself. Just what we call, we have the same names for things. So, I'll shop one in there. We call people who do contract sites but not very well just box kickers. They just go around kicking boxes just to see what's in them. Is that one you have, or do you have a similar one? Sorry.
No, you had cut out just when you said it. What was it again?
Box kickers.
Oh, no, I haven't heard that one. Okay.
No. That's people who don't really check, they don't really check the boxes. They don't really check the site. They just walk around, kick the box, make sure nothing falls out of it onto the next one.
Sure. See if a rat pops out.
We should steal that for sure.
That's for sure. Oh my God. So what inspired me to reach out to you for this one was that article that I'll hold it up here. Probably the best title I've ever seen on a pest control article. Don't be dumb. Come on. Did you come up with that title, or did the publisher do that?
Oh no, I came up with that. I mean,
Okay.
the guys from Pest Magazine are fantastic, and they do very much end up curbing my enthusiasm. That is probably one of the few ones that slipped through the gaps. But I'm pleased that it did, because I was very pleased with that one as well. So
Okay,
yes.
So yeah, it was there was an interesting article when we've like everybody with the new remote monitoring type stuff that's happening, and the push for data. I feel like as an industry here in the States, and obviously worldwide, we're wrestling with this whole issue right now. I don't think that this is something that we've sort of settled out. What's the best way to deal with this? What's the best use of this technology? And I think you kind of point to that a little bit too. I really liked when you said if you're going to sell a light bulb as a candle, you'd say, "Oh, it's just a really bad candle." Where it's a new thing, and I think we have to integrate it into our systems and our protocols, and change what we're doing. We can't just replace that. We call them tin cats. I don't know if you call your mechanical stations, but like a tin cat, a mechanical station, just put a smart one there and do the same thing we've always done. And now this little box is just going to tell us when it's caught something. And I don't think that's the only change that we need to make to really capture the most usefulness out of this equipment.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, absolutely not. And the real turning point in my appreciation of smart technology came from it would have been the very beginning of this year, and I went to an FM show in London at the Excel Centre in London. And in my ignorance, I probably thought of the FM community much in the same way the FM community probably thinks about the pest management community, and it's from the other side of that fence. And I was like, these are guys that just look after buildings. How hard can it be? And I walked into this show, and it was just LCD screens, data. And I was like, what on earth's going on here? I mean, how entrenched the FM community has become in data generation, to the point of I was looking at one great big smartboard at the front of it, and this smartboard recorded everyone's face walking into the room and basically mapped where they went and what they did, and from that they built a profile of me from walking around the stands as to the things that I was most interested in. And I was like, that's incredible, and that's the level at which the FM community has embraced technology is fantastic. And this was even further sort of like that nail driven in even harder when the guy on the stand next to me had a little black box. And I was like, what does your little black box do, sir? It measures carbon dioxide. I was like, that's grand. What's that for? It's like, in an office, what happens is everyone sat in the office, and if the carbon dioxide goes above a certain level, people start to get a bit sleepy and productivity goes down. I was like, that makes sense. And he's like, and so what my little box does is it measures that, and then it opens a window. I was like, okay, that sounds amazing. What stops someone standing up and opening a window? He said, absolutely nothing. But what my box does is it measures that. So actually, the company can sit there and say, at what levels are we most effective? It's the data that he was selling, not the ability to open and close a window. That was completely, irrelevant. That was just an additional add-on. It was the data that he was providing from this little box to the FM companies, to that company itself. That was worth its weight in gold. And I was like, how many of these little boxes have you sold? He's like, this year alone, last year, sold £1.5 million worth of them. I was like, okay, that's it. I'd love to do that, selling a small black box to measure a bleeding glimpse of the blindingly obvious. So yes,
Yeah.
and that's what really struck it home, that actually we are so far behind this curve. There is so much technology out there that we have the ability to jump on the back of, to piggyback on, and also so much technology that we can make our own. But actually, why are we not doing it? Why are we not engaging with this plan? If that man can make £1.5 million selling a box that measures breath, then why can't I make more money, developing a device that can protect buildings, that can reduce disease, that can do all of these other things that pest management is all about? And not only help me do it better, but to prove to people I can do it better as well. So that was the big wake-up call for me.
Yeah, and so for those that we don't tend to use that acronym, FM, you're talking facilities management, right?
Yes, sorry, facilities management. Yes.
No, that's okay. That's okay. we don't tend to use that acronym. So putting these remote stations, I'll give you some of my experience in the field. We haven't implemented them wide for all of our commercial accounts yet. But what we've been seeing where we're taking over accounts that have this sort of these sort of programs in is largely nearly unmonitored programs. Like you'll have the devices put in, and then really no one really ever kind of looks after it. The data is generated, and it's a self-serve sort of situation. You could go in and look and say, yeah, oh look, there was this many captures, over whatever time frame you wanted to determine. But the trend analysis that has to sort of happen by somebody who knows what they're looking at, and literally technicians not confirming that the station's still kind of functioning. There's some holes in this where. And that's where I kind of believe what we're trying to do is just plug this into what we've always done as a way to do what we've always done easier, a little lazier. And I think it's sad because there's a giant opportunity there for these to implement them in sort of unique, creative ways that we really haven't touched on. I think there's a business model change coming that's sort of disruptive for the pest management industry, and I think these might be sort of at the center of that. And we may go 10 years and have a conversation 10 years from now and say, wasn't that funny when we thought we were just going to put these stations down, and now our 2-hour service at a factory went down to 10 minutes and we didn't do anything. That was, back then that was funny.
See, I think that's one of the fundamental misunderstandings of smart technology, is that it's going to reduce the amount of time on site. It's not. It's going. In my opinion, and this is my opinion, you've got that amount of time on site, but what it does reduce is the necessity to check a box if you already know what's going on in it. So actually, that 3 to 5 minutes that you would have spent opening the box, closing the box, you can spend that time looking at the space between the boxes, because we're all aware that pests operate site-wide. They don't just operate within your boxes. And of course, if all you're ever doing is checking what's going on inside your boxes, you're only having a look at an island in the middle of an ocean of activity. So actually what you're doing is you're allowing yourself the same amount of time, but you can use it more flexibly. It gives you more flexibility to do the job that you need to do to prevent problems. Those rodents may not be coming into the boxes yet, but you can actually spend the time, instead of kicking the boxes around the outside of the building, go around that building and actually have a look to see, are there new holes? Is there a breakdown in vegetation? Has something changed on the site? Instead of having to scurry and check boxes, you can spend that time a lot more effectively and a lot more efficiently. And therefore, what you're not selling there is not a reduction in time. You're selling an increase in value. You're selling an increase, I'm preventing problems as opposed to just reacting to them.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Gabe.
Excuse me. My question would be, Alex, at least on this side of the pond, it seems like the marketing efforts coming from the remote monitoring manufacturers is exactly opposite of that. They're pushing, no, you're going to spend less time on site. You're going to have less labor per job. What's the classic? I literally had the magazine sitting on the floor and then I just filed it. But the classic Bell line, less time, more
profit or something.
More profit or something like that. So I think that how you're choosing to implement that is with a lot of integrity and wisdom. I just don't know if industry-wide that's actually what's going on.
And yeah, there is a gaping chasm, isn't there, between, I'm a technical bard at heart and quite romantic with it. I have a look at the tools, I have a look at the chemicals, and I say, this is how they should be used. And of course, somebody with an ounce of marketing acumen turns around and says, actually, I could save you, 10p on the pound on that, or, 10 cents on the dollar. And that's like, well, that's a much better plan, isn't it? But I mean, so I will stick true to my guns and my as you say. I'm not sure about the wisdom. I can certainly go for the integrity though. But yes, but there's a lot of things you can sell with digital or smart technology that you can't necessarily sell with a standard dumb system. And I think one of the ones we talked about or touched on is data. You can sell data, you can sell trend analysis. And with that, you can do two things. I mean, number one, you can tell people when that trap has gone off. But the other thing you can do, the other thing you can start to sell is you can sell the information that the trap hasn't gone off. Because beforehand, that wasn't a saleable commodity, was it? It was simply, if anything, it was a bit disappointing. The traps haven't gone off. It wasn't something to shout about. But now you say, have a look at all this data, all these metrics. Look at how none of the traps have gone off. Do you know why that is? Because we're doing a good job because there's no rats there. Suddenly, you can turn that whole narrative on its head, and then you can turn that into a marketing exercise. And that's how I think we should start to view the use of this digital technology. It's not a replacement. It doesn't catch rats faster. It doesn't kill mice faster. It doesn't encourage them into box any sooner. If anything, it probably encourages them into the boxes less, rapidly. But what you can do with it is you have another thing to be able to sell. You have another value stream to your business, and that's how you sell them, in my opinion.
Yeah, and one of the things you bring up that I was glad to see, and I don't see talked about enough, is the value of the null set in your data and your rodent control program, especially as we've seen. There's been a push the last 5 years or so to reduce the number of stations that we have, especially in these larger accounts where you're going to have fewer and fewer, and we're going to do an assessment-based station placement. So we're going to put stations only where we know, the rodent wants to be near this warm compressor and near this thing and near these doors, but then the rest of the place, we don't need to have 100 stations. We're going to put 10 very keenly placed stations. And my problem with that was, okay, well, we lose the value of the null set. I need to know that there isn't activity happening in all the rest of the place. We tend to still hold to, grid patterns. And I guess it would be more, traditional that way, where you're having stations placed, kind of everywhere, because I want to know, yes, there's these places that are hotbeds for rodent activity, but there's places where I may not anticipate there to be rodent activity, and then I find some unexpectedly. And I want to be able to know that, and I want to be able to confirm, okay, they're not coming from all these other areas. We know that. We have that null set. Now we can really focus in that area. And I worry as we get to this, trying to deal with labor shortages to reduce the amount of time so that one technician can do more jobs, because it's hard to hire people these days. It's hard to get enough labor. We're trying to get more production out of the same, a fewer number of people, that we're really sacrificing something there. And Gabe, I wrote down a couple quotes that I had found from some of the marketing, from some of these devices, and some of them were greater productivity, help with labor shortage, and the only way you do that is cutting time on the job and doing more jobs with the same amount of people, improve profitability, remote monitoring is prevention. There's a lot of things going on out there that I think people get the wrong idea. I'm not against the technology. I'm just thinking that the applications here that I see are a little suspect.
So can we go back to that last one? Because I think that is wildly erroneous. It's about prevention. Well, no, because it's not necessarily about prevention. You're not preventing the rodents being there, are you? What you're doing is you're reducing the time to reaction. So it's still reactive, but all you're doing is you're taking a reactive period, or where am I? You're taking a reactive period of treatment visits, and you're taking it down to that. So it's not prevention, it's a reduction in time to action, which is a very different thing. Yes. Prevention would be to not have the necessity to have those boxes. Yes. So sorry.
Oh my God, no, and that's Gabe's heard me rant about this privately, so I'm laughing because this is something that has bothered me. There is no way that having an interaction with a device is prevention when it's on the interior of a facility. All that I see, a lot of these are being used to. They will tell you that you failed sooner than your technician going there to check the station. You'll know right away in real time, we have failed. There was a mouse that was in there. There was a rat that was. It's already in there by rule. It's like prima facie proof that you failed. Yes, it's in there. And here with FSMA, we have a Food Safety Modernization Act from a few years back. It mandates prevention in food handling environments. And people say, we have remote monitoring. We have prevention. Like, no, that's not prevention in any way. So it warms my heart to hear you say the same thing.
So, well, and I think we're missing another thing that you kind of touched on it there, which is you can like with digital devices, you're okay. Prevention aside, but what you can, if you are a savvy negotiator, one of the things that you can bring into the equation now when it comes into negotiating with clients is you can negotiate accountability now, can't you? Because if you have the access to that data, imagine if you gave access to that data to your client as well. But with that access to your data, you made them a promise. You promised to pay me a little bit more, and I promise that I will turn up, and you can see I will turn up within so many days of an activation. And not only is it my word for that, you can see that. That transparency of data very much allows for a much stronger negotiating platform for the pest management industry, especially with these massive industries, which is food. And I'm not sure what it's like out in the States, but certainly in the UK, pest management industry, food industry, we are absolutely, yes, we are teeny tiny comparatively. And so, being able to make these negotiation standpoints that are within our favor is going to be a phenomenal asset to us. And if we can do that through data, not through prevention, through data, then that is going to be something really, really very interesting.
Yeah, I think your point on accountability is a huge one. Like, it occurs to me, like, I would absolutely love to have stations that had remote sensing capabilities that you could put next to doors that tend to get propped open, and dock levelers that tend to be abused and left open and whatnot. And then you could instantly know. I mean, you could literally get a notification that goes straight to a plant manager that says, "Hey, check that back door. Somebody's out there propped it and they're having a smoke break." Because we just got a mouse that ran in there. I mean, that sort of thing happens. And most of the time we're chasing that with, hey, let's look at a security cam, see if they're really propping these doors open, whatever. I mean, it would be a great way to have that, real-time data. But I think those sort of creative applications is where this stuff will really hit a home run.
Oh, absolutely. And you mentioned before about, your standard grid patterns and your strategies and the rest of it. One of the things that I have been toying with, and so I've been working with several different smart technology manufacturers and developers, testing their hardware, software, and everything else in between. And one of the things that we found that was quite an interesting concept is this idea of adaptability. So what you can do is, theoretically, you could reduce the number of visits to site a year, or you could reduce the number of boxes on a site. But what you do then is you use your boxes as a sonar net or as a risk management tool. And therefore, as soon as your boxes start to go active, okay, let's take, for example, you've got a box in a grid pattern with a site grid pattern, 100 boxes. That's going to take you some time to get around. Now, if you reduce those boxes to half of what that is, but you use those as a sonar pattern, at that point, when you have a box go off, suddenly then you activate the boxes all around it, and you bring them into the equation at that point. So under normal circumstances, when there's no issues on site, when there is no data being generated, when everything is A-OK, it's nice and easy going. But of course, it's nice and easy going. So it's cheaper for you, it's cheaper for them. But when things start to go wrong, as they invariably do, you give it a long enough time and you'll get a rat or a mouse. At that point, you have a targeted, structured approach in that area, using that heat map, using that sonar net to respond to an issue in real time. It's not going to take you a huge amount longer, but at the same time, the rewards from it are much, much more sophisticated. And one of the things I'm looking at in the UK, and this is going to be hard. Yeah, I haven't discussed this with people very much in the UK at the moment, so this is going to be a surprise to them. But is to go away from the standard sort of like 8 visit, the annual 8, 12, 16, 24 visits, structured. I'll come back every 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. Because in my mind, that does nothing. If you come back at those times. Instead, what you should be saying to your client is, I'm going to come back 16 times a year. Now, I'm not going to come back in structured times. I'm going to come back 16 times a year. And I might do 6 of those visits between December and January, because that's when the rodents are coming in. And then over the 3 months over summer, when I know a lot of rodent activity is going to be relatively low because they are out in the wilds, let's say, for example, then my visit frequency will be lower as a result of that. And it will give me more time as a technician to go out and do more lucrative, more reactive jobs, which are insect-based and stuff like that. They haven't lost anything in terms of visit frequency. They haven't lost anything in terms of the time you spend on site. But what they have got is they've got control when they need it. And what you've got is you've got the time to do things that are beneficial to your company when you need it. Nobody loses out. And in fact, you could probably charge a bit more than that, because you could just turn around and say, I'll come round. When the boxes go ping, I'll be there. And if they go ping a lot, it's because you're not keeping the site tidy, and you're going to have to carry the can for that. So that's just my personal opinion on how we can then use data to start. And that's the revolution I see. The revolution is not necessarily in replacing one box for another. The revolution is how we start to apply the data. And you're right, it's going to be a big change. It's going to be a big change in concepts. And it's going to be, a lot of your listeners are going to be listening to me right now being like, it's a good job he's the other side of a big ocean. Otherwise, I'd give him a damn good rubbing, because he's just upsetting the apple cart here. But
No.
it's going to have to change, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is, and that's why I was saying. I think it's a business model change and training, and there's a lot more implications to this than just replacing things. One of the things Gabe and I had talked about that I could kind of foresee, and I'm not a proponent of this. I wouldn't want to do this style, but I could see as remote monitoring, and then if we have infrared cameras with AI where you could do pest recognition software and things like that, you could conceivably see a time in the next several years where technology advances to where you have a zero regular visit. You have you set up a monitoring sensor network, say in like a residential home, and say you're covered for the year. We'll check one time a year to make sure all the equipment's working. Our office is going to get a notification when something happens. We see that there's ants on a little camera. We get a rodent capture, whatever. We'll dispatch a technician right out, almost like a security system for a home, but in pest control. And then you just sell people that. You just say, okay, it's going to be a monthly subscription, whatever, per month, and we'll show up when we know there's a problem. You won't even know that you had a problem. We're going to already get the notification. I'm not a proponent, but I could see where this certainly could really change that, that model.
Oh, absolutely. But the thing you've got to think about is the security industry did that a little while back, didn't they? CCTV cameras and the rest of it. And yet people feel considerably more at ease when they see someone walking up and down the street with a flashlight. They're not doing anything more than the cameras do. In fact, they probably can see considerably less. But there is a definite psychological aspect to seeing the human being in the equation with that. And so I think there'll always be the necessity is the wrong word, but there'll always be the option to have human beings on site, because having that person walk through the front door with their badge in their bag gives people, clients or third parties, for example, if you're in a food establishment, having that person walk through, they're doing something proactive, there is something going on, actually gives them the confidence that that site is safe and secure. You don't necessarily get that warm, fuzzy feeling for looking up at a camera being like, that's my little guardian angel up there. In fact, you probably think the opposite most of the time, don't you? Like, what are they watching? So I think there'll always be a human element to this, but the human element may very well change roles to an investigative tool or a quality assurance type role beyond that of checking every box, making sure it's okay, making sure all of your I's are dotted and T's are crossed with that. So
and we'll definitely see. I feel like here my sense of people up and coming, younger generations and whatnot, it seems like they want less human contact. The less, the better. We have a lot of companies moving to exterior only treatments, and where you don't have to see us, we won't go inside. People here are having you got the Ring doorknob cameras. They got or doorbell cameras, cameras all over the place. So that sort of surveillance state, they're kind of okay with. I could see it. I could see it working. I'm not going to do it, but I could see it working.
Do you think, Alex, it seems like maybe that what you described of we're going to do 16 visits. It'll be whenever the traps go off, whenever we get alerted. It seems like that would work really well maybe down the line as the technology increases to such a point where it's maybe more along what Andy's talking about, where you have some sort of like camera system or something where there's a great deal of confidence that we're not missing something. Do you think with that type of model, like we talked about at the beginning, where having a tech on site, you're able to look between the monitors, you're able to
Yeah.
look where the monitors can't see, is that, the a push to move to that kind of model? Obviously, I think there's a lot of benefits to it, but are you losing an aspect of that human element of the service that the technology right now can't show us or can't perform?
It absolutely is going to have to be a balancing act. And my big want for the technology in our industry is to actually not necessarily see a reduction in the technician's role. I see smart technology as being an augmentation to the technician's role. I'm seeing it as being an early warning system, an adaptive tool, a reactive tool. It's reducing that time to action. It's reducing that time to detection. But there's going to be absolutely no technological counterpart, let's say, to the intuition and drive of that technician on the ground, because they will always be able to see things from a different angle, even if that's metaphorical or literal. They will be seeing things from a different perspective, and it'll be a long time before we have a box that's able to outthink a human being. Maybe not all human beings, but most of us at the very least. And so with that, there's always going to be a role for the technician. And I think there is a real risk in statements such as it's going to reduce labor costs or it's going to reduce the amount of time on site. But actually what you're going to end up doing is you're going to end up shooting yourself in the foot, because all that'll happen is it will reduce the quality of your service. The boxes will keep saying no show, no show, no show. But of course, if a rodent doesn't go into a box, then it's always going to be a no show. And you're going to have problems occurring. You're going to have damage to stock, to reputation, court cases. I mean, just in the UK, just recently, a fairly large brand, I will not name names because that will probably get us all in trouble, but just got a £1 million fine for having pest-related issues in some of its stores. A smart box arguably could have picked that solution up quicker. Arguably, smart technology alone would not have prevented that from occurring. So there always needs to be that balance between the technician and their knowledge, their skill, and their behaviors, and the technology which is able to augment that and close the gaps down when they're not there.
Yeah, I think the human element is going to be essential, especially in the commercial sort of environment, food processing, distribution, that sort of thing. I've had too many experiences where we have smart enabled devices where we're taking over an account and assessing the level of rodent problem by the rub marks on the station on top of them as they bypass the station and run over the top of the station. The station's telling you everything's fine, but the technician with the visual inspection saying, no, we got problems.
So, I mean, the way I always like to, so I do a lot of lecturing, I do a lot of training for our industry as well. And one of the ways I like to give this analogy is you're on site. Let's say you come back to site once a month and you're there for about 2 hours. That's 2 hours out of 30 days. That's the equivalent of me turning around to you and saying, right, I'd like you to watch Return of the Jedi, please, but could you only watch about 15 seconds of it? And from that 15-second snapshot, can you tell me exactly what was going on? And the answer is no, obviously, isn't it? You'd be forgiven for thinking there was never an Ewok in Return of the Jedi. Flip side of that, though, is if you ask ChatGPT to write you the story to Return of the Jedi, it will come back with some absolute nonsense. But you can sit there and you can recognize the salient points of it being that film. So it's going to take that human interpretation, but at the same time, we can use that, AI technology, we can use that smart technology to keep an eye on the site for those other 29 days and 22 hours that we are not there. So it is a balance between the technology and the person that is going to make this work. It's never going to be just one or the other.
Yeah, and I've kind of come to the thought more recently in the last few years that what we really need to work on as an industry worldwide, I think we have to work on better ability to have good predictive modeling for each pest species. We need to be able to have be able to predict what kinds of environments are going to have problems and assess sort of a weighted sort of risk to each environment based on what our observations are. Because I think that's going to be that filling that gap between, okay, we have remote monitoring sensors in a facility that are looking after the place for 29 out of the 30 days of the month. And that one day we're here, we're doing visual inspections, and then we have a way to have very good predictive modeling to what we can anticipate happening into the future. Because I don't feel like we have, you had mentioned intuition, and I think that's one of the things where we are substituting intuition, which can be of varying quality in each person, depending on their experience, depending on what they've seen in their career. The best ones will have very good predictive modeling in their brain. But if you have technicians that have a year, 2 years, 3 years, they may not have that intuition, and we need to sort of start working on each species being able to go, these are the things that we can look at, the observations we can make, and sort of have qualitative and quantitative data on this is what we're going to put together, and this is your chances of having a problem, given what we're seeing.
Absolutely. I mean, there's two thoughts that spring to mind with that. Number one, data allows you to do some, raw data by itself, as you say, is very hard to interpret. It's a whole load of ones and zeros on a page, or it's just high, low. I'm not sure how you guys fill out your treatment reports, but looking at a treatment report, you may not be able to see the wood for the trees necessarily, but it's how you interpret that data that gives you that skill. Technicians that have been in a long time, they intuitively interpret that data in their head, they can figure it out. But for everyone else, and especially for people outside our industry where you're trying to communicate this information to them, there needs to be a way to process it. And the simplest way to probably describe that is the use of things like heat mapping, for example, around a site. You can sit there and say boxes 21, 14, 86 all had recurrent activations, and you're like, oh, is that bad? And you're like, no, they're the three cluster of boxes that are around the southern fire escape. A technician with intuition would know what's going on there, but without that analysis. And the other thing I'll mention is it's interesting you say predictive models, because I'm currently writing an article which I've titled "Are Mice Robots?"
Perfect.
which is actually how predictable are rodents? Because if you understand all the variables, are they predictable? And if they are predictable, then actually we can have some real fun with that.
Yes.
But chances are, and my feeling is, the more you look into this, they are not, though, are they? They will do some predictable things, but generally speaking, they can be very unpredictable in what they do. So keep an eye out for that one as well.
I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness. Now, the other thing that I think will have to change is our relationship with data, like you're saying. But I think that one of the things we have to consider, people love to say data. They just love to, that's a big buzzword now. We have to be able to quantify our observations sort of into ways that we can compile and analyze. The other thing is that what we've been working on is what we call adaptive data, where we're doing micro data projects within a larger facility where we have a sort of set standard kind of setup. You'll have small problems that need to be addressed, and you need to be able to come up with sort of scientific method, make a hypothesis. This is what we think, and then what tools do we have to generate data to prove or disprove that hypothesis? And we might run those for several weeks or a month or two to be able to determine, okay, this is the next course of action before you tell somebody, say, I don't know, cut open a wall or, dig up a slab to find something. You have to be able to prove those. And I think that's another area we as a industry as a whole have not really been great at. I think we like to check those stations on a routine, and that's it.
I think what we would refer to that in the UK is that it forms part of our due diligence and our justification process, which is if you sit there and you say, right, I'd like you to dig up your kitchen floor, please, because I think there's rats living underneath it. And I dig up the floor and you'd be like, oh, no, my bad. It clearly was coming from next door. Then, of course, you're going to have your client turn around and say, you literally that's £2,000, £2,000, $2,000 worth of pulling a floor up, and you say now for nothing. And of course, if you don't have that justification, if you don't have that due diligence, then you've got no leg to stand on other than like, whap, whap. That's a little bit unfortunate, isn't it? So, and data can really help fill into that. You can say, look, from all of the data I've generated, and it doesn't have to necessarily be smart technology at this point, does it?
Yep.
Because, and I say this a lot of the time, again, in my public speaking, how much data do we generate every time we go on site? And invariably, technicians turn around and say, well, not really, we're not scientists. And you're like, bollocks, sorry. But you create a tremendous amount of data every time you go on site. You are analyzing, you're looking at the weather, and that factors into what you're doing. You're looking for footprints, tail marks, swipe marks, chew marks. There's a huge amount of data that you are internalizing and analyzing. What we're really bad at in our industry is not generating data, it's recording data. And then we're even worse at manipulating that data to mean something to the clients as we go forwards. So we're not data poor, we're just not data savvy. And I think that's the big problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's something we've started to train our technicians on, how to quantify the things that they're seeing and recording those. Like, that's going to be super important as we all go forward. Is bollocks a bad word? Did you swear? Is that a swear?
What's that even mean?
I absolutely did not swear. No, absolutely not. That was not swearing. You don't need to worry at all.
Is that? I didn't even think it was.
It's a slang word for your testicles, basically. That's what bollocks are.
Really?
Oh, I could see that.
Sorry.
I could see that.
Okay, I had no idea.
No harm, no foul.
Well, to be fair, it wasn't a problem till I explained it, and now it's a problem, isn't it? There we go.
Oh, it's not a problem. You're good.
It's much better now. Much better.
Oh dear.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, no, it's like I say, it's fascinating to have these discussions from two very different theatres, because as I mentioned before, I mean, my assumption is when you guys go out, there's an element of pride in your job. You're invited, people. Maybe not so much for the younger generation, but going into restaurants and stuff, people like to see that you have, people have pest management in place. In the UK, if you try and walk into a restaurant in the middle of the day, they'll tell you, no, can you drive around the back? Can you come in the back door? And could you just pull the signs off your van? It's a very different kettle of fish. We operate in a much more submarine fashion. We don't like, everyone needs us at some point, but nobody likes to admit that they use us. It's a very different climate that we operate in, which I think probably comes with its own challenges. That's it, and it's really interesting to hear you guys, especially say people external treatments. We do not do any kind of, the only external treatments that we will do are generally speaking for rats, and that's it.
Okay.
We don't do a huge amount of. We do almost no, with the exception of wasps. There is no external insect work for us at all.
Wow.
Because of the environmental concerns of applying insecticides externally. Almost all of our insect jobs are internals.
Wow. We have companies that only do outside. Like, they don't come into a house at all. They don't come inside. They do exterior only. They'll power spray your house outside and do whatever. You fire up the gas powered sprayer and away you go.
Just got a 1,000-litre ICB on the back and a power sprayer and a can-do attitude. Don't even need to get out of the car.
Exactly right. Yes.
Oh God. No, it's such a weird dichotomy, really, because if you did that in the UK, you would be hounded down the street and from pillar to post. It's not literally the most, as I say, the most external job we get with insects ever is wasps, and even then, it's frowned upon to apply large quantities of insecticide outside for a wasp nest. Most people would much prefer that you go up there and cut the bloody thing down and run off with it. So there we go. It's such a weird thing, but it's interesting to see that we're facing the same challenges when it comes to the embracement of smart technology. Because I was kind of expecting to come on here today and hear you guys say we are all over it. It's fantastic. Everyone's picking it up. Now, it very much sounds like the same thing, which is this reticence to engage with this crest of the wave. I mean, why do you think it is that your technicians are or your industry so reluctant to engage with it?
I think some of it is initial cost, for the equipment, getting it set up and all that kind of thing. I think that for us, I can't speak for everybody. For us, the value to our client isn't quite there to support the investment that they would have to make in a lot of cases. So we haven't had people like really clamoring for it. It's something that's creeping along and getting put into larger food processing and larger facilities like that. To my knowledge, I don't think it's been into the residential market almost at all. I don't know if I've seen a smart device in a single house ever. Also for us, some of the efficacy issues with the stations, it's hard to justify that huge upfront cost when we go, okay, do we gain that much in the application of this, like you're saying, where the time we really just reduced the time frame, so now we know that we failed sooner than if we had just come back to find out that we failed. With the speed of biology, how many times, if we're there, say a lot of these like food processing, we're there every single week. If we knew in 5 days instead of 7 days that there was a mouse in the station, did we gain anything based on their reproductive rates? We didn't. We gained a little. Maybe we scramble, somebody out and get them right out there right away, or maybe we would have waited till that next visit anyway. So that value hasn't really amounted to a lot. I'm more interested in how can it be creatively impactful to like our business model and how we're substantively doing things, because there are some changes we can make there, and we're considering taking that upfront cost off the table. Just saying, okay, if this is a value enough that we can really make inroads marketing wise and sales wise, like this is a leverage point where we have a creative application of this technology, then it makes it almost a no-brainer to just say, well, we're just going to foot the bill for it and put that in there. So there's a lot of things we're exploring, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it's exciting in the sense that because it is new, we have the opportunity to dictate how this potentially is going to run, how this works. So you look back at how things were done 10 years ago. 10 years ago, somebody had to be the one to sit up and be like, right, you have a look at the Mayers and the Dubocs and folks like that. It's like pulse baiting or saturation baiting. This is a novel term and technology we're going to use, how to use these new products, these second generations that we're going to start to use. That's how we will use them. No, this is our opportunity to now say this novel and emerging technology, this is us, this is how we will apply it, and this is how we will sell it, and we will then set the terms for the next 10 years until the next big thing happens. So we should be excited, really, by it. Yeah,
no, for sure. And I think more of this style conversation, I think, needs to happen. I think that's the biggest thing, is exchanging ideas with conflicting viewpoints. I think we tend to hear a little bit of an echo chamber effect with a lot of these. We hear the marketing for the devices, and it's not something that was particularly appealing, as far as the marketing messages that I was hearing, and that's just echoed, and we don't hear a lot of that. That's why reading your article was kind of refreshing.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, this is somebody, it has some, I guess, unique ideas on the topic.
And they do need to be unique. Otherwise, as I said before, if light bulbs were invented by candlestick makers, they would either be very, very bad light bulbs, or they would never have been invented in the first place. And I'm not sure how long we've got to keep talking. I could happily talk for hours, but you probably have things to do, like sleep and visit family and stop for Christmas, all of these things. But if I may, just two final points. You mentioned how can we use these types of products in domestic markets, for example. And again, this all comes down to innovation, or this comes down to how you phrase the question. I mean, in the UK, we might say, right, I'm going to come in day one, I'll do my survey, I'll see where these mice are in your home, madam, and I'm going to apply some traps, and I will come back within 7 days. And of course, you come back in 7 days, and one of two things have happened. Either all the traps have gone off, and they went off a long time ago. You have a lot of very slimy mice, and of course, a trap can only catch one mouse once. So of course, you've lost efficacy there. Flip side of that, none of the traps have gone off. It's a completely wasted visit. Who fits the bill, you or they? So with that, what you can do with smart technology is it doesn't necessarily have to be so complex as having every one of those traps being a smart enabled trap. What you could potentially do is you could get a remote activated camera facing a range of traps and say, right, I've got 5 traps there. When 2 out of the 5 have gone off, that is when I will return. And not only that, I can see trap avoidance. I can see when these are happening. And instead of charging the client for a wasted visit, or instead of upsetting the client by the underside of their counter smelling like the inside of a slaughterhouse, I can actually sell them a service which is tailored to them. Yeah, and there's nothing more exciting than phoning up your client and saying, right, I've caught the little that's in your attic. And really, have you? Yes, 15 minutes ago. I'll come and grab it for you. It shows that you are, that level of protection that they're receiving is significantly higher than you walking back down out to the attic a week later being like, nope, nothing's going on. And they're like, well, there definitely is, because I can hear it every night. Yeah. That's how you can sell smart technology to the domestic users. And again, you're not catching those animals any faster. There's no increase in technical efficacy, but what there is an increase in is all of those other bits around the side, and that's what people will pay for. They'll pay you for that rather than other people. So that's how we think about it, or that's how I think we should be thinking about it in those terms.
Yeah.
And finally, you said that cost is a big thing, and it is a big thing. And I honestly believe that yes, cost is always going to be a stumbling block, but cost becomes a bigger issue when you buy the wrong thing. You buy the all singing, all dancing, it's got all the bells and whistles, it's got a machine gun turret built into the top, and it screams hallelujah as it shoots. And you don't need that, though, do you? You just need something that catches rats and mice. So why are you paying for that? So what I'm working on at the moment with some of the other smart technology is a tiered system, basically. So if you imagine you've got 4 tiers, and you can imagine it on a graph like this. So 4 boxes like this. And on one side, you have information and control. On the other side, you have activity and discrimination. So if you have a device which only produces information around activity, that would be things like your sense boxes. My box has something inside it. Great. If you're putting that box in a void space in the roof or in the floor, that's perfect. If you're putting it outside, less so, because you can get a lot of conflicting information in there. Is that leaves? Is it non-target animals? What is it? But if it's just in the roof, perfect, because anything in that roof de facto is a pest. So that's level 1. It just produces information around activity. Level 2 would be producing information that has a discrimination value to it. So that's things like cameras. It's not providing any control, but it's telling you there is movement, there's activity. And not only that, I can tell you, is it a squirrel? Is it a rat? Is it a wild boar? What is that animal that is, and is it a problem or isn't a problem? So you are able to then reduce that time to detection, not reduce that time to reaction, but to reduce that time to detection. Flip side of that, you've got activity, which also then has control. That's your snap traps. I have gone off, or I've gone off and not caught anything, or I've not gone off at all. And then finally, you've got the highest tier, which is control and discrimination at the same time. And those are the really top tier ones. That's saying, right, I've got something in here, it's eaten so many grams of bait, and it was probably a rat. I've got something in here, it's stuck to my sticky board, it definitely looks like a blue bottle. And that's producing a lot of information, but it's not necessary when all you need to do is say there's something in my attic. And I think that's where a lot of pest managers are getting technology wrong. They want to go for the most expensive system because they see that price equals value, but actually they're not buying the right bit of kit for the right job. And so they're trying to pass on the value of a very expensive system to a client that doesn't need that level of data interrogation. And so we need to start applying the right data metrics or the right tools to the right client. And so that's my last, that was so wildly preachy, wasn't it? I'm so sorry. Who is this strange Englishman who's joined you to preach around, to tell you all these things? But there we go.
I kind of want the machine gun. I think.
Yeah, I think I do as well.
How very American of us. We would want the gun.
That definitely would be a very unique USP, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Just tiny little turrets popping up everywhere,
Yeah.
just with very small caliber rounds or large caliber, depending on how much mess you want to make. I don't know.
Right.
But there we go.
Now, I hadn't thought of it this way as a remote sensing sort of setup, and I don't know why, but we've used remote game cams for years where we'll deploy them in specific applications where we need to know what's going on when and be able to make judgments from that. We've had ones where we've collected data on feeding on liquid bait stations and unique situations so we could determine exactly what times of day most of the feeding was happening and whatnot. And that's been, that's remotely delivered. Those game cams will have a cell connection, and we have sort of like a collection of them that we'll deploy in these micro data scenarios, as opposed to like large scale installations where we're putting in stations, remote monitoring stations, 100 at a time or something, where we're doing, smaller scale, and very custom. But I hadn't really thought of them as their own little remote monitoring.
Yeah,
systems,
it's absolutely it is smart technology. I think probably a lot of the folks listening to this will be surprised actually as to how engaged they already are in smart technology. But because it's something that they've done for a while, I couldn't possibly be smart technology. Smart technology is this thing on the horizon that it connects to my phone and my apps, and it makes all of these funny noises. It's not. We've been using it for a long time. It's how we use it that's going to change.
Yeah. Oh, awesome, Alex! This was fantastic.
Yes,
we got to have you on again sometime for some other topics, because you got a lot of knowledge, and I like the British spin on things.
Well, I hope to do my nation proud, and hopefully, yes, I've enjoyed this very much, and you'll have to let me know how your viewership takes this, and it would be fantastic to come and speak to you guys again. I definitely have opinions, so I'm happy to share them.
No shortage of that. Okay.
No.
All right, Alex, that was great. We hope to talk to you again soon. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much.
Yep. Thank you.
take care.
Right. Bye. Okay, that was awesome.
That's great. That was so good. Well, guys, hope you enjoyed that episode of Coast to Coast Pest Talk. Fantastic conversation with Alex. So happy he was able to make it onto the show. As always, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, our podcast, and join our LinkedIn group, Coast to Coast Pest Talk LinkedIn group. It is going down. So have a good one.